This month's Where Did the Road Go is sponsored by Tim, Allison Cook, Super Inframan, Stephen St. George, and Lindsay Trebet. Thank you for making this show possible. And if you would like to help support the show, check out www.wheredidtheroadgo.com and click on the Patreon link. It's only $3 a month, and you get extra content all month long.
Transmission start. Welcome to Where Did the Road Go? Join us as we wander off the path and explore lost history, consciousness, the paranormal, unexplained mysteries, alternative thought, and much more. We are present on the web at wheredidtheroadgo.com. Now here is your host, Soraya.
Welcome to this edition of Where Did the Road Go? And this is the 9th anniversary show of Where Did the Road Go? And I have this year chosen as my anniversary guests the Snake Brothers.
All right.
I'm glad to be here, and happy anniversary to Where Did the Road Go?
Yep, happy anniversary.
Yeah, man. 9 years. That's amazing.
9 years, and I can't remember what it was like not doing the show, if that makes sense. Like 9 years is a long time. It doesn't seem like it when you just say, 9 years, but like, yeah, I don't ever remember not doing the show at this point.
Right. And do you, I mean, have you basically published a show a week for 9 years? Like, have you taken any weeks off?
No, I've never taken a week off.
Never taken a week off.
You know, You had asked how many shows I did, and I actually counted because I have them all on the computer, and I forgot. I should have done it.
Should be some simple math to figure out 52 times.
But he doesn't do the same number of shows a week every week.
Right. Sometimes I've had 2 shows a week. Sometimes I've even had 3 shows a week.
Well.
And then if you count the Patreon stuff, there's almost a Patreon segment for every show. Not always, but a lot of times.
Right. Let's see. Yeah. How often does a guest say, no, I can't do a Patreon?
Every once in a while. Sometimes they tell me in advance they can't do it. Sometimes they're like, oh, yeah, I'm tired, especially when they're older guests.
Yeah. So 1 show a week for 9 years would be 468 shows.
Yeah. So well over 500.
Yeah. So if we multiply that by 2, assuming that most people do a Patreon, that's 936.
So we'll just say it's 900 shows for your 9th year.
Yeah.
It's probably close to that. It wouldn't, because I didn't start the Patreon till like 2015, maybe.
Right. So we'll just say that when I multiply it by 2, we're putting in all the Patreon episodes plus the times you did more than 1 show.
Right. The mid,
right
the midweek.
around 900. Yeah. That's 900 shows. We just did 227 for ours.
Well, technically, your shows are the length of my show plus a Patreon segment.
Oh, yeah, that's true. And actually, the last 2 shows we've released have been over 3 hours, which is ridiculous. Like, we're trying to cut back on that. It's too much.
I have to keep mine to an hour and a half because they're on the radio first.
Right. That's right.
And then for a while, they were on a number of radio stations on the internet as well, including Dark Matter Radio, when that still was a thing.
Yeah, so you have radio slots, so you have to time them precisely.
Yeah. Deprogrammed Radio and Dark Matter Radio, and there was another one, too, that had it on for a while. But I mean, VBR is where I started it, and so it's still on VBR, and that's, I'm used to doing radio, so I don't think of taking time off for anything. It's like, no, there's a show every week. There's a Last Exit every week for the last almost 30 years now.
Yeah, that's true.
There's been a couple of times where early on the weather was so bad that none of us could get to the station and the show didn't air. But I mean, it's been like maybe 3 or 4 times in 30 years.
But you also can, because of the way the show works, you can record them at any time as long as there's one that week, right? So
yeah, right.
It's not the same as as doing it live.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
When I started, I was doing it live. I didn't have the equipment to pre-record.
Yeah, and so doing it live would result in probably more missed shows because of various things. But since you're able to pre-record a lot of it, you can you can have it ready. Yeah,
I mean,
you've never had a show be like canceled due to a power outage or anything like that,
right?
Yeah.
There was one show on VBR that didn't air. I think it was actually one of the 2-part ones I did with Shirley Black because my car. Something pierced the tire on the way there. Like literally just tore right through the tire. It was like a giant piece of plastic. And I forget what happened. My jack didn't work, or I didn't even have a jack and didn't realize it because I just got the car.
Oh.
And I was like stranded in the middle of nowhere. And I'm like, okay, if I could either get home or to the station, I could fix this. And I'm like calling everyone I know who's local, and like one person didn't have her car. Another person's like, oh yeah, I'll come right down. It's going to take me like 45 minutes though. I'm not anywhere near home. And I'm like, of course you're not. And I'm just like going down the line and nobody is around. And I'm trying to get people to the station and nobody is around. And I'm like, I can't do anything. I'm stuck. There was still a show that week, just not on VBR.
Well, that's when you phone it in, right? You just call the station and be like, connect my phone to the...
There's no one there.
Oh, right. That's right. It's automated. Forgot about that.
I mean, there are people there during the day, but before me, it's a pre-recorded Grateful Dead show.
Well,
so, but yeah, there has literally been a show every week.
That's amazing. And so, and nothing where you walked into the station and set something on fire, or anything like that, shorted stuff out that ruined things.
The first time we went into, and I had to think quick on this. The first time we moved into the current building we're in, they got everything up and running except for the internet. So I walked in. They had the internet running, but not the wireless. So I come in, and I'm like, going to do a Skype interview, and there's no wireless. And I'm like, I called the general manager. I'm like, hey, where's the wireless? He's like, oh, we didn't get to that yet. I'm like, cool, I got a Skype interview in 10 minutes? So I had to dig around under the board, unwire their main computer, and then plug it into my laptop to do the show.
Well, at least
I got it.
Got it to work. Yeah.
Yeah, the power went out once, and that was before I got there. I was literally coming up the hill to the station, and the power went out. And I went, oh, that's cool. Okay, well. But that was a pre-recorded show, so there was still a show that weekend.
I'm really just amazed, because of the Kundalini stuff, that you've managed to publish a show a week without any crazy electronic problems anywhere in the systems you use.
That's because it doesn't. I have some control over it at this point most of the time.
Okay.
So it only does minor little things here and there.
Yeah. I just, in my mind, I like to imagine you as this like walking disaster for electronics. So maybe that's not accurate.
No, it used to be. It totally used to be. Okay. When I didn't have control over it, it was bad. I mean, I worked at a record store, and I'd go to scan check somebody out, and the scanner would just go crazy. And I remember one manager did not believe me. He just thought I didn't want to check people out. I'm like, dude, I can't scan. And so he's standing there, and I'm scanning stuff, and the register's just going nuts. And he's like, well, there's probably just something wrong with the register. And I step away. I'm like, you try it. He tries it. It works. I'm like, it's me. And of course, most people don't get that. They think you're just, messing with them.
Right.
Like, how would that be you,
Yes. Yep. They immediately start trying to figure out how it can be something normal.
Yeah. How are you tricking me?
Yes. Right. This is a prank.
I'm not. I just can't do it. I'm sorry.
Lasers don't like me.
Well, I'm guessing it was the electronics in the register that were having an issue.
It's just more fun to say that it was the lasers.
Yeah. True. I mean, it could have been, maybe.
Well, let's see. What have you learned? Like, since this is the anniversary, it's been 9 years. What do you think you've changed about how you do the show? Like how you approach it? I mean, I'm sure you've learned a million things from all the guests you've had on, but why don't you talk about a little bit like where your headspace was when you started and where it is now and how it's grown and shifted?
Well, I didn't think the show would be successful, for one, because I didn't want to be, I wanted to take this stuff deeper than most of the shows I was hearing out there, especially, the stuff like Coast to Coast, which is very, very shallow in its approach to this stuff. I would always listen to interviews and be like, oh, I have all these questions. Why aren't you asking these questions?
Yeah, I agree with that. Yep.
So I didn't think anyone was going to care. I was very happy I was wrong about that. And when
spent 9 years proving yourself wrong.
And I have such awesome listeners too, which is just fantastic. I mean, I'm absolutely humbled by the people who listen to this show. And when I started, I mean, there's a lot of stuff I've learned over the time period, because part of this too is an exploration for me. I want to understand this stuff better. I want to figure stuff out. So, I mean, like talking to people like Jeff Ritzman, and learning about and George Hansen and stuff, and learning about liminality and how that all plays in, and and things like Mike Clellan going, well, when you saw that UFO, what was happening in your life? And me going, I don't know. Let me check. Oh, that was a super liminal point in my life. Holy crap.
Yeah.
Something I wouldn't have looked for prior. And now I go through writing this book about all the stuff that's happened to me. And I'm just like, oh, that makes sense. Oh, look, that connects to that. That makes sense. Huh. I didn't see any of this stuff the first time I went through here.
Yeah. So you learn what to look for.
Right. And now it's hard not to see when you look at it.
Right.
I mean, certainly there's still stuff where I'm going, what the hell was that? But, there's so much I've learned from guests coming on and just popping ideas into my head, which I presented that whole idea of the sort of the Mothman explanation being something that sent energy backwards in time from the bridge collapse, creating basically like PK energy at that point years earlier. And that came from talking to the guy who wrote Illuminations. It came from talking to whatchamacallit, who wrote Time Loops. Both names are escaping me at the moment. But like looking at their ideas and going, oh, that's interesting. And then suddenly one day it all kind of clicking, going, but what if this?
Yeah, this happens to us with our show too. And what it always feels like is we're getting better questions, not necessarily getting many answers.
Right.
Yeah.
Better questions and different perspectives.
Yes, which is very important. Like we're especially on your show, you deal with a huge, broad array of subjects. And so narrowing down the field of questions, or at least like refining them, is extremely important for something like this that has so many possible explanations, because there's so little really known about it. And it's so difficult to really study scientifically.
Yeah.
In a lot of cases.
Yeah, that's true, because it's not something that you can just create.
Right.
You can test PK in the lab, but you're going to get generally micro PK. And as Shirley Black has said, they don't want macro PK.
Yeah, I think of it in terms of, like in my mind, it's interesting because this is what happens with astronomy as well, right? Astronomy is the study of phenomena that we cannot put in the lab. For them, you just, you can't build a star. You can't have an exploding star. You can't build a gigantic molecular cloud in the lab and study it. I mean, you can do certain things on small scales, but for the most part, you have to look out at space and wait for things to happen.
Right.
And in some cases, if you study a certain area for a long time, you may be able to predict, hey, something interesting is going to happen in a little while when these two things get close to each other. But for the most part, you're waiting for stuff to happen and studying them when they do happen, and you have to be looking. Right. So it's interesting because that's sort of similar to looking at a lot of paranormal stuff. You don't know when it's going to happen, so you have to be looking in the right spot for it to take place to study it at all.
Yeah. And to me, I don't even care about proving the stuff. I want to understand it better. I want to understand why it happens, and I want to understand why it happens to me, because it doesn't happen to everybody. Now, I don't know if that's because they're blocking it out or it's just not necessary for them.
Not necessary. What do you mean by that?
Like it could be that this stuff, it changes you when you have these experiences. And maybe the people not having these experiences are exactly who they're supposed to be. Or if we do pick out our lives in advance, maybe they're the people who, decided they don't want to deal with this life.
Right. Yeah, I did that last time. Let's have a normal life with none of that stuff this time.
I mean, it's like the superhero thing. Like you watch any superhero show or whatever, and the superheroes are always like, why do I have to have these powers? And it's like, really? You can fly. Why are you complaining? I want to be normal. You want to not fly? What's wrong with you? I'm so super strong. Awesome. I want to be normal. No.
Yeah, that's true. I've read plenty of stories like that.
You notice the guys who build all of their awesomeness never complain about it.
Right.
Like what? Like
Iron Man and Batman. They don't complain.
Why did I build this machine?
Normal. If someone wants to be normal, whatever normal is for that culture, that's fine. I'm like, but I don't think people should be looked at badly for not being normal. I like not being normal is way more interesting.
Yeah, it is like the liminal state of normality, right? Out there on the edges is where the interesting stuff happens.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and the most creative, interesting people are generally not completely sane.
I agree with that.
And I mean that in a good way. I mean, they get, they output their non-normalness into their creativity.
Right. butchering the saying, there's a fine line between genius and insanity.
Yeah.
Something like that. Basically saying that they're two sides of the same coin.
And none of us are completely sane. We just think we are.
Well, yeah. We do a good job of pretending to ourselves that we're totally sane.
Yeah. No, everything's fine. I'm completely sane. Why'd you do that weird thing? I don't know. Let's never talk of it again.
It's even weird that there's like an idea of sanity or normality in terms of the way the mind works, and we don't understand how it works at all.
Yeah.
Like, there's stuff that goes on and I'm assuming this, but like just based on my own experience, like there's stuff that goes on in my mind that I'm like, why did I think that? Or where did these thoughts come from? It doesn't, I don't have to project it out into, to communicate these thoughts or things that my mind is doing to the world. In some cases, like I may not even pay attention. I can just kind of ignore the ramblings of my own mind for a while I'm like focused on a task. But the idea that one person could project everything that their mind is doing or communicate that somehow to another person, that anyone would find it normal, I think would be highly unlikely.
Yeah, I don't think there really is a normal. I think
that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
The fact that we have laid this sort of baseline, like that there is a concept of like, well, this is normal workings of the human mind.
Yeah.
It's more like there's normal cultural standards.
That's right. There's normal outward expressions.
Yes.
Yeah.
Of what's going on in the mind. And those are taught.
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
Some people don't conform to the teaching and they're considered insane or they're considered abnormal.
Right. And I mean, it's like if you are conforming to the normal cultural standards, that's fine. If that's what you want to do, that's your choice to do that.
Yeah.
But I don't think the problem is people are so worried about not being normal, and it's like, no, it's fine.
Yeah, and it's not normal even if you go to a different culture or if you traveled in time, back in time, like say, nobody, say, a couple of thousand years ago would think that our behavior is normal.
Right.
And we do the same thing when we look back.
Yeah,
like, wow.
You cannot say that about the king.
Yeah, that's right. So it's just it's kind of a made up line, like a made up a normal. It's not even real.
Right. So what I would say is we're all crazy in our own heads. We've just learned to project what was acceptable in the normal way and keep all the crazy inside.
Right.
Yeah.
And then I think
you got a couple of buddies that you can let the crazy out a little bit when you're hanging out.
Let out the cray. That's right.
One of the comments someone once made about hanging out at Last Exit, because I've always had a rotating band of co-hosts, and one of them says to me, she goes, the thing that makes this show so awesome is that you give everyone a space to just be themselves. And it's like, and I never thought about it like that, but like everyone's just okay with everyone. And and we kind of encourage the weirdness in people.
Yeah.
And I'm like, cool. I never thought about it that way, but I'm really glad that's a thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was one of the things that attracted me to your show initially as well was, I'm listening to stuff and I'm like, I've never heard, people be able to talk about this kind of really strange stuff so openly before and have a long form conversation about it.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, that's what makes it interesting.
And when I started, I was doing a lot. I had, my first guest was Jim Elvich, and I didn't even know what I was doing at first. So I was like, am I going to do this as a round table? Like I had a few friends that I thought might work, but then I heard Jim Elvich on Coast to Coast talking about his Universe Solved book. And I was like, this guy's awesome. And he graduated from Cornell, which is associated with WVBR. It's not a college station, but it is associated with Cornell. And so I contacted him and he was like, oh, on a Saturday? He's like, I don't usually do Saturdays because I, have like date night with my wife or whatever. He's like, but I'll do this. He's like, it's your debut show. And I used to listen to WVBR when I lived, when I was going to Cornell. He's like, this will be a blast. I'll totally do it. And from there, I was lucky enough to give it David Weatherly right off the bat. But then it was a lot of ancient history people. Robert Schock came on and Laird Scranton and stuff like that. So I wasn't dealing with UFOs and paranormal a lot at first. It kind of opened up after that.
Yeah, and it's, those topics merge at the edges.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah, we've definitely on our show focused more on the ancient history, but you can definitely see at the edges of stuff that there's strange things happening.
Yeah, it seems like whatever is going on today concerning UFOs or paranormal activity also was going on all this time that we've been here, and people have been communicating it in various different ways.
Right, and it's had various types of influences on the cultures across the time. So,
oh, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. And at least when the problem is, okay, when you get weird lights in the sky now, well, it could be damn near anything most of the time. We have so much technology.
Yeah.
But back then, we didn't have that technology, so weird lights in the sky.
Weird lights in the sky now could just be your neighbor.
Right,
out, like hanging out, flying his drone. That's like...
but back then, it wasn't technology, but at the same time, how much can you trust the reports?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If they've been translated 100 times, well, how much of that was lost in translation?
Or even one time.
I've been back and forth on that too, because I'm really interested in ancient texts and the writings of ancient people and their accounts.
Yeah.
And, growing up Christian, we were taught as young children to read these stories and take them basically at face value. These miraculous things happened. These miracles happened. Mm-hmm. God's walked the earth. That sort of thing. And, so that becomes normal in your way of thinking about the world. But you don't notice it happening around you as it happens in the stories. And you grow up and maybe you get skeptical of it. And then you sometime later realize that, maybe the interpretation is a little out of whack. And so then you take it literally again with another different type of interpretation, like ancient aliens or, encounters that are more like UFOs. And so I like the idea of respecting and revering the ancient writings for the most part, taking the accounts as true as the writer was able to express. And then, of course, like you're saying, you have to take in the fact that they've been rewritten and copied and translated in different languages. And so context can be changed. But it's a puzzle for sure.
And the thing I've been saying that when coming to dealing with the paranormal, the thing I've been saying the most lately, just kind of like wrapping, when someone says, well, why do you believe in this stuff? It's like, okay, so we have phenomena that is not only experienced now, but has been experienced throughout written history from every culture in every time period. Why would we not believe something is going on?
Yeah, it's a good argument.
It's like, and that doesn't mean that Bigfoot's flesh and blood or that aliens are nuts and bolts, are coming here in nuts and bolts craft, but some people are having these experiences and have throughout history.
That's right. Yeah, a lot of times when at least I've found when I'm talking to someone who's asking that kind of question, you have to start by peeling back their preconceptions of what they think you think it is.
Right.
Yeah. It's different. It's one thing to believe that something is taking place, that not all of this is basically made up or whatever, then to go and try to have a long explanation for something. Like, I don't have any explanations for any of this stuff, so like talking about thinking that people do experience what are called having UFO experiences does not mean I think that, aliens are showing up here from a distant star.
Right.
That's
right.
Right. And so you have to peel back their preconceptions.
Yep. Well, and you often get, someone will be like, do you believe in aliens? And I'm like, yeah, I believe there's alien life. There could be alien life right in our own solar system. Doesn't mean they're coming here.
Right. But what they're usually asking you is if you think UFO reports are true. Right.
And yes, I think UFO reports are true. I just don't think they're aliens.
Yeah. We don't know what they are.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. You get that with the Fae stuff too. People are like, you think those stories are like, they're just fairy tales. I'm like, yeah, but they're really interesting, and they come from somewhere.
Yes. Yeah.
They're telling us they're like, you believe in fairies like living in the hills in Ireland or whatever. I'm like, no, I'm telling you that, like, read the stories and compare them to other stuff from different cultures, and you'll see that there's something strange happening here.
Yes. Yeah. It may not.
This isn't a one-off.
It doesn't necessarily conform to any one explanation.
Right.
So, and that's another thing I see with the paranormal now, is that everyone wants this singular explanation for everything, and I'm like, I don't think there is one. I think there's numerous explanations that could cause the same thing.
Yeah, that's right. The only singular explanation is weird stuff happens. Like,
yes, yes.
You know,
and much of it seems to be interconnected with us. I think we're the main common factor.
Right, and you know, just taking this back strictly to cosmology, even just the, like, say, you know, you take modern day science, as much as we as laymen can understand what is being said about how the universe works, and our science is, you know, put together a list of rules that they see that we see operating in the universe, and basically what amounts to like a constant basis. Like, everywhere you look, this rule seems to apply, but that doesn't mean that we found all the rules.
Right.
And, you know, there are plenty of systems that we're aware of, simple systems that humans make, like chess, for example, that has a bunch of rules. Most of them you can sit down and you can watch. I think Feynman made this analogy. You can watch a chess game, and by watching it, you know, maybe you're watching several chess games, and you see, after a while, you pick up on the rules.
Right.
And then one day you're watching maybe your 100th chess game, and you see somebody do like the castle move or whatever, something you've never seen before. And it would look like a total violation of the rules, but it's not. You just hadn't ever seen that rule show up, because it requires very specific circumstances, and then it also requires the intention of one of the players to use it.
That's a great analogy.
Right? So it's like, just because you've been watching the universe for 200 years in a scientific fashion, and you've noted down a bunch of rules that seem to be common across the universe, does not mean that you've seen all possible rules. Some of them may only be enacted in very specific circumstances in very rare cases.
Right.
And if you're not looking in the right place and see it happen multiple times, you don't know it exists. So yeah, just like chess, it's you never should assume that you know all of the rules for any given system.
I would also like to point out, when you're mentioning earlier that we can't reproduce stars and stuff in the laboratories, they have actually done so with the electric universe ideas.
That's right.
But they can't reproduce them at the scale.
No, not at scale, but they reproduced on it, because it scales down with the electric universe stuff. They've been able to do things like create small galaxies, you know, that actually spin like galaxies we see out there, and stay together just with electrical properties.
Yeah. So the question with that is, how much scale invariance is there in that kind of system? Yeah. Which is a good question. I mean, we see it in geology. You know, scale invariance is a thing in geology. That's why you've got to have something for scale if you take a photograph of some geological feature, so you know whether you're looking at a small boulder or a huge, enormous one. Right. So it's the same thing with, you know, the question is how much can this stuff scale?
Before other rules start to apply.
Right.
Yes.
Other rules that you're not thinking about.
Yeah.
Begin to apply once you scale it way up. You know, like a good example in geology would be, you know, shear forces. You know, you could have a cliff made of a certain type of rock or a spire that's so big, but you couldn't just continue to scale that thing up without
with the same material.
With the same material, because it would start crushing itself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know, also when you see like the people trying to explain how the ancients moved these gigantic stones, and they're like, well, we took this 300-pound stone and we moved it like this. So clearly we just have to scale that up. And it's like, no.
Yes, that's exactly.
Yep.
So the thing I wanted to do tonight, now that we're like a half an hour into the show, and I can't remember which of you has the story, because you're just Snake 1 and 2 to me. One day I'll meet you in person. One day I'll meet you in person, and I'll be able to tell which one of you is which.
Yes, that will happen.
Once I get the masks off.
That's right.
So which one of you had this crazy experience?
This would be Kyle, Snake 2.
Right. Yeah, as Snake One, Russ, I experienced it on the periphery. I was at the edges of the experience.
And I think you talked briefly about this in a Patreon segment, but you didn't get into all of it.
Yeah.
So I want
So
because this is really a fascinating story.
I agree.
Well,
I always encourage him to tell it. He never wants to do it.
yeah, it's weird because it took place about 21 years ago or something. It was 2001, and I was just like, I was a totally different person, totally different frame of mind, and so I walked away from this whole event thinking one thing, and then as the years have passed, I've puzzled it over in my brain, and just it's like what you said at the beginning of the show. I have no idea what it means. I have no idea if it was. I don't know what it is, but it's just there. And I talked a little bit about it on your show. Maybe it was in a Patreon, and then we did a Patreon where I told more of the story on our show. So this will be, I guess, the second time told the full length.
Yeah.
And basically it starts with back in 2001, I was living in San Antonio, Texas, and took a job in another town called Bernie, which is about, I can't remember from where we lived,
30 minutes, maybe 45
minutes drive, depending on traffic, of course. And I was working the night shift. It was like a fast food restaurant called Sonic. And so I was closing up and then driving home late at night. And I started like really having trouble staying awake while driving home. I'd be like, get hypnotized by the road and then doze off and like wake up suddenly, and I'm driving. It was just one time it literally terrified me. Like I think I went completely asleep and then woke up suddenly at the wheel.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah, and that's one of those where you wake up and then you realize you just woke up and you're like, how long was I asleep?
Yeah, it just terrified me.
Yeah.
And so again, at the time, I feel like for some reason I feel a desire to make this disclaimer, which is just silly, but we were raised Christian, and I was a devout Christian, basically. I don't know if I would call myself devout. I was Christian.
Christian frame of mind. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know what I am today. I don't consider myself a follower of the faith in the same way, just because I look at it more like I was talking about before, as these ancient texts that it need to be analyzed, and they're mysterious.
right.
Now we worship Satan.
No. But yeah, I'm still a spiritual person. But at this time,
I would like to point out, though, if you worship Satan, you're technically a Christian, because Satan is a deity within the Christian pantheon.
That's right. We're still Christian.
Oh,
We just
okay.
worship Satan now.
You're just the dark side of the coin there.
Yeah, we've just changed sides. That's all.
Sorry, keep going.
yeah. So at the time, it was like purely like these Christian ideals, right? And immediately upon waking up and being terrified of like having passed out at the wheel, I was just like, I start praying, right? Seeking the Almighty to help me out. And I was before like blasting music on the stereo, trying to stay awake. So I shut the music off and I just start praying, like mentally in my mind, talking to God. And I'm doing this day after day. Every time I'm coming home from work, making that drive, I'm like basically talking to God and starting to do it in a way that I hadn't really done before. So it was like this daily meditation where I'm really like reaching out, trying to communicate with the Creator, right?
Mhm.
Almighty God, whatever that might be. And this practice led me to like, I should read the Bible. I should start reading the Bible, and just like, I don't know, I had this urge to do it. So I start reading. I have a Bible, and I start reading these Old Testament stories and stuff, which is still my favorite biblical stuff, is all the Old Testament stories, the myths, and these characters.
That's
and
where all the good fire and brimstone is too.
these characters in these stories always encounter these otherworldly beings, right? Like so many of the characters and the main characters in these Old Testament stories encounter flesh and blood extraterrestrials.
That's right.
Angels.
Right.
And they converse with them. The angels come because there's some important situation or whatever. And sometimes it just seems like so mundane or whatever. Like this guy just shows up at their camp and they end up like hanging out with them. And then later they find out there was some, there was some purpose to it. Oh my God, that guy was an angel or something. It's just weird stuff. And I was just like, man, this happened. So I want to meet one of these guys. And that was the whole thing. So I'm driving home and this becomes like my new prayer. It's just like, hey, send me one of these angels. I want to meet one. I want to interact with one of these beings and see what it's like, And don't know why.
And this is the process of magic.
That's right.
Yeah, whatever it is, there it is. That's
I've told him that before.
So one night, driving home, having this same sort of prayer going on in my head, and the prayer is interrupted suddenly with this voice that just like overwhelms all my thought processes and everything, and it's just like, you will pick him up on the side of the road. Just so loud in my head, like a different, not my own mental voice, and it just shocked me. And so immediately I'm just like, go ahead.
That's how I got the name Soraya.
Really?
It was blasted into my head. It was a female voice. It was loud as hell. And it just said the name. And I was like, what just happened?
Wow.
Yep. That I can tell you, obviously is not something you can prove, but
right.
It is real.
Yeah.
whatever it was. So, I immediately start frantically looking around on the side of the road. And
you're driving, it's like 2 a.m, something like that, right? That's where these drives.
Yeah, it's like I'm usually driving around 1 or 2 in the morning.
It's like witching hour kind of deal. He's out on the road in the middle of nowhere.
And I'm on the inner loop of the city of San Antonio 410 at this time.
Okay, so not middle of nowhere. You're in the middle of the city.
I was already into the city.
Yeah.
And I'm looking around because I'm thinking I'm going to pick this guy up on the side of the road, like right now.
Yeah.
And there is all the right lanes of the highway are closed off. So we're all bottlenecked into the left lane. And there's the traffic barrels, right to your right, just shoop, 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 shoop. We're passing these traffic barrels. It's a long line of cars that I'm in. There's no construction going on because it's the middle of the night. They're shut down, but they had closed off all those lanes on the right. And sure enough, under the street lights over there, at some point, I see this guy walking on the side of the road. And I'm like, there he is, like, there he is. And yet I didn't pull over. I just we're going too fast. I couldn't slam on the brakes. I would have had to weave between the traffic barrels and drive across this blocked off area of the highway. And it, for some reason, I'm just like, no, I can't do it.
Failed the test.
It's true. I totally failed the test. And I immediately knew it too. I'm just like, I get down further down the road, and I'm just thinking to myself, you failed. And so
you didn't want it bad enough. I'm like, crash through those barrels and
that's right.
Drive through the construction site.
I'm thinking if I actually believed that was an angel, I would have crashed through the barrels and gone over there and picked him up. Because what's going to happen, right?
Well, you could have just stopped and he could have come over to you.
Yeah, well, you're going 60 miles an hour in a bottleneck with people at night on your bumper.
Oh, there were other cars right behind.
Yeah,
okay. He was in a long line of cars going through a 1-lane construction area.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So slamming on the brakes is not.
You can see it it happens in a situation where there's another test there, right? Like you have to pass this bit.
I would have had to slow way down in order to get between barrels without actually running into one of them. And I would have basically just stopped all traffic to try to turn in. And then I was already, it's like I see this guy and he's to my right and I'm going 60. It's like, oh.
Yeah.
Anyway, I failed. And I knew it. And it's true. I mean, if I would have really believed that that's what that guy was and not doubted it's probably just some random person, which is, I can't tell you that's exactly what my mind was thinking, but I mean, this is what my internal dialogue after I passed the guy up was like, if I'd have really believed that this was like a supernatural being that was just waiting to be picked up over there by me, then I would have just blasted through the barrels.
Right.
So I didn't have faith, this is a big Christian thing, right? And this happens in the ancient stories, like their faith is tested. And so that's exactly what I thought this was. I was like, okay, this was a test of faith, and I totally failed. And so I'm back and I'm praying, and I'm just like, okay, I failed the test of faith. Give me another chance, man. Come on. I will not fail you this time. And so I'm going the rest of the way home, and I'm keeping my eyes peeled, and I don't see anybody. And I'm getting right next to the apartment. I'm about to turn in. And now this is not real dense city at this spot.
And you're no longer on the freeway.
No longer on the freeway. I'm on a small little road, and there's like, not a whole lot of street lamps and stuff. It's not all lit up. But I see a person right before I'm turning into the apartment building. I see this guy walking on the side of the road again. And so I'm like, well, gonna do it this time. So I turn around. I pull up over near him, roll down my passenger side window, and I'm just like, hey, man. I just felt like I should offer you a ride. And he's like, nope, I'm good. It just turns me down. And I'm like, well, are you sure? Like, I don't know. Something just told me to, offer you a ride. He's like, no, I'm good, man. Thanks. So off he goes. And I just roll up the window and I turn into the parking lot laughing. It's just like, thank you.
Yeah.
For giving me a second chance to like prove myself. But obviously it didn't happen, right? It's just, I felt like that was my second chance to prove that I would do it, and that was that. And so I pretty much forget about this situation. It's a kind of a comical, funny thing, except for the voice, right? That was like, wow, that was a really powerful.
Yeah, very profound
moment. But otherwise, it was a simple test by God. And I failed it, and then I was given a second chance to prove my faith, and that was allowed, and I did it, and so I felt good about the whole situation, but that was just it. It was over. And so some months go by, and I think now we're in the summertime. I've changed shifts. I'm now working in the morning to the afternoon. My buddy has been hired on with me, so we're carpooling together. And my car broke down. I was borrowing my dad's Jeep, and me and my buddy are working the day shift, and then we get off at it's like, I don't know, 2:00 in the afternoon. It's basically about the same time, 12 hours earlier. And it's hot outside. It's like so hot in Texas. So we get off work, we take off the shirts, we take the top down on the Jeep, pack the top into the back, and get in there, and we're just like rocking this Jeep with our shirts off, cruising down the highway, kind of going slow because we're, no top, and then we got the Soundgarden blasting on the stereo.
Nice.
Just rocking out. And my buddy that I work with is actually the lead guitarist in the band, in my band too. So it's like, we're all about rock and roll. We got a job together. It's like, hell yeah, buddy. And we're going down I-10. This is a major highway. Obviously, anybody that lives in this, lower United States would probably know I-10. And between San Antonio and Bernie, it's lots of semi trucks, everything hauling ass. You're going 70. Now it's like 80 miles an hour, 80 miles per hour speed limit there. So we're kind of poking along, but all this traffic, and we see this guy walking on the side of the road, and he's all in black, and he has this giant, this big guitar he's got, and he's wearing like a leather hat that looks like like a Stevie Ray Vaughan hat or something. It's just this badass leather rock and roll looking hat, and he's wearing black robes that are like blowing in the wind. He's all black pretty much,
and he's got a big ass
and he's got a big guitar case and a duffel bag, and we're just like, check that rock and roller out, man. Let's pull over and give him a ride. And we're like, hell yeah. So we pull over, we pulled over like about 50 yards in front of him or something. We move all the stuff, and we had the top down on the Jeep, and all the pieces, doors and everything were just kind of tossed in the back. So we were like straightening those up, and then I walk out there to meet the guy, and right when I get to him, go to shake his hand and introduce myself, it's like immediately when we shook hands, I was just like, mildly stunned by his appearance, or I don't know. It was just like, whoa, this guy, the way his face looked, like shiny, but not sweating. And like, I don't know how to describe it. His skin was like bronze. I couldn't tell race, he didn't look like, he had like bright blue eyes too, or something, like real bright eyes, dark skin, bronzy, shiny skin, looked old, but not like withered or anything, but just aged. And I don't know, piercing stare.
Yeah, he was tall.
He was taller than me. I'm looking up at him. He was a tall guy.
And it's like, Texas, middle of summer, 100
it's
degrees.
Hot as hell, and he's wearing like these black robes, dude. He's like fully covered up, and yet he's not sweating. I mean, his face should have been just like dripping with sweat. He's walking, carrying this duffel bag and this guitar, but he's not even sweating. No drink. He had no drink with him. We tried to offer him. We brought these 2 giant drinks from Sonic, and we tried to offer him drinks, and he didn't ever take a drink the whole time we were with him. But anyway, I introduced myself. He introduces himself as Larry Sparks, and I offer him the ride, and he asked me, I asked him where he's going. He asked me do you know this place or that place? I didn't know either place that he was talking about. And then I just proposed like, well, I'm going as far as this, so I can take you that far and then drop you off there. And he's like, that would help me a great deal. Another thing about this guy is that as I'm telling this story, whenever I'm quoting him, I can't do it exactly because he spoke strangely. He didn't have an accent, but it was just the way he worded things was just odd. So in any case, he accepts my offer to give him a ride in a strange way. And without saying yes, right? He never says yes or no to anything. He just provides you some information like, that would help me a great deal. So that it's like... So that's like, a yes? I'm making the decision. Okay, well, get in the Jeep then. And it was like the moment we shook hands, it was like I had the sensation that he knew me or something. And I just got that from my journal. I was reading the journal entry that I had written shortly after this happened. I never finished the story in the journal, which I wish that I had, because there were so many details that I knew at the time. But I could never bring myself to write the whole thing down in detail. So most of this is from memory.
Right.
And some of it is stuff that, like, as it goes through, stuff that I remember happening because they came. Anyway, keep going.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, Russ is going to help me out with some things. But so anyway, we get in the Jeep and we start cruising, and immediately, Ty, you would have to know Ty. He's one of these people, he's very outgoing. And he'll just chat with you and just get you talking and ask you questions. He's one of those people. I'm not so much like that. But so we get in the Jeep, and Ty starts talking to him about Soundgarden and stuff, and this guy's like, nah, I don't really know him. And anyway, Ty's carrying on this conversation with him, and he's starting to say some strange things that I just don't understand. One of which is he claims to make I guess like videos or media or do recordings of some type, and he puts them in the archives. And he goes around, he travels from place to place, from church to church, and does recordings and puts them in the archives. And he always talks about the archives as though that it's like we should just know what that is. And of course, we never question him about it. It's just stuff like that. So
yeah.
On we go, and Ty's talking to him about our music and all of this stuff, and there were multiple occasions where it felt like he was reading my mind, or he would do something that would basically just exactly what I would think he would do, and Ty's telling him about our music, and then he's asking questions, and so we're talking about, oh, what is it about? And, so I start describing some of the lyrics that I write and the kind of stuff that I focus on with my lyrics. And of course, I carry my books with me that I write in. And Ty starts showing him one of my books, and he hands the guy the book. And I immediately in my head, I think, God, I hope he doesn't like see this one, really vulgar poem that I wrote in there as a joke. And of course, he opens it to that poem and then like holds the book up to the front of the Jeep and says, "You mean like these lyrics?" And I'm like, no, not those. He does this stuff over and over and over again. Things just like that. And yeah, it was just totally bizarre.
Seemed like you didn't quite fit.
No, I still to this day have never met anyone like this person at all.
And it seems like from the moment you shook his hand, you got put into like a weird liminal state, right? It's like that this whole situation became like, because you were noticing stuff. Like, do you think Ty was noticing weird stuff yet?
Oh,
or were
dude,
weird things happening and you were just letting them go by?
It's like that's what I felt like. Weird things were happening and we were just like letting them go by and just not. But Ty and I had at the end of our encounter with this man, Ty and I discussed it all very, in detail with each other, and we did notice all these things together, and we were just like, "What the hell was he talking about?"
Yeah.
So, moving on. Basically, I have this thing that I have to do, and I have to go work on my vehicle and get my vehicle fixed before dark, so that I can return my dad's Jeep to him. And it's just, it's one of my responsibilities that day. And so I'm going to drop this guy off on my way to where I have to go. And by the time we get to that spot, I am basically trying to tell him, like, I got to drop you off. And like, when I finally turn around to look at him, the moment we make eye contact, my mind changes. I want to take him where he's got to go.
Wow.
It's that kind of stuff. And so I'm like, you know what? Why don't I just take you where you're going? Just give me directions. And so he accepts that in his way. And so we drive on, and he gives me directions. And basically where he takes us is one of the oldest buildings in San Antonio, the Cathedral, down on, I guess it's like Roosevelt, Military, somewhere near those two streets.
It's the middle of...
And I've never been back there, which I really need to go back there. We've been talking about that for years. Like, we should go back and check that place out.
And ask them if they have the archives anywhere.
Because at the time, I'm also... This is before ever going into any kind of deep dive into the mysteries, right? In my life. Like, I hadn't done all these, deep dives into mysteries, into encounters, or into the mysteries of ancient texts, or whatever. I just,
this is before all that stuff. Yeah.
So, so we take him to pretty much the oldest building in the city, and we drive up, and of course Ty and I still are like, we don't have shirts on, we both have long hair, we're like rock and roll dudes. And we pull up to this place where he tells us to go, and there's like a wedding rehearsal or something. Everybody's decked out. Suits.
Dressed to the nines.
There looks like there's a wedding dress or something, like either they're doing a rehearsal or whatever is going on. And we're like, and basically he invites us to follow him now. So now we're parking. Not only are we now just taking him to where he needs to go, but now we're getting out and we're going to follow him somewhere. And I think this all has to do with the guitar. Like, he's going to show us the guitar. And so Ty and I are like, yeah, we got to see this guitar for some reason. And so I think, like, should we put our shirts on or something? So it's like, yeah, let's put our shirts on. Put our shirts on, and we're walking through he leads us through this crowd of people who are all dressed to the nines, doing like some kind of wedding rehearsal thing outside this church. And it's like, none of them see us. Nobody makes eye contact. Nobody, it's like the strangest thing to me. We're walking through following this guy, and people are just walking in front of us and doing all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, excuse me, sorry, but it's like, nobody even notices that we're there. And we go all the way through that thing, and nobody had spoken to us or looked at us at all. And I was just like, that was weird. So we get to he takes us kind of around the back of some building, and it's next to a wall. And I think that wall was the border wall around the
like the courtyard of the church. Or
yeah, it's like this big, tall stone wall. And there's some picnic
Around
tables
the grounds,
back there,
yeah.
and there's like a grassy area. And we sit down on this picnic table, and he proceeds to open the guitar case, which is the guitar case is like a large, like a dreadnought acoustic guitar would go in here, you know, a large body acoustic guitar. He opens it up, and it's this tiny little ancient looking classical guitar that's fitted in this giant case, and it's just covered in signatures all over it. And we are just like, what is this? Completely unexpected thing. And he starts describing this guitar and like all this stuff that it's, you know, he's been carrying it with him, and all these famous people have signed it, and it's incredibly old. But we've been talking ourselves up, like we're like, yeah, we jam, dude. We've got some great riffs, you know, we're gonna rock out. And he hands me this guitar, and the strings are so detuned, they're tuned down so low that it's like flabby, like, you know, it's like really low. And so I start going to crank up the machine heads and tighten this thing up, and he's like, no, it's too old. It'll break the neck if you tighten those strings up. They're, you know, so just play it where it is. And so it's like, we've been talking this big game about how we can rock out, and now we have this tiny little guitar that's very delicate, and the strings are tuned down so far that you have to play like quietly, or it's buzzy. And so I try to jam some riff. It sounds terrible. And I give up. I give it to Ty. He tries to jam something. Probably sounded a little better than mine, but it was terrible. And then we give it to this guy, and he plays us a song, and he just strums this thing. It's so delicate, and it's just beautiful. And he sings some song. I don't remember what it was. I think it may have even been in Latin or something. It's just like, I don't remember what it was, because anyway, he plays this beautiful song very quietly and delicately on this guitar. And right at the moment that he finishes the very last note, the church bells start ringing. Ding, ding. And we're just like, oh my God, that was amazing, dude. So we can't play this guitar, and he just plays it awesomely. And it was like humbling. You know, it's like, wow, we think we're hot shit, and I don't know, we just can't even. It's the mind frame of a 20-year-old, right? You want to show people you can rock, and you just can't. It's great. And so we ended up staying there with him, hanging out behind that building for a long time. And every time I tried to leave, because I'm like, God, I got to get back. I got to work on this car. I would say, yeah, you know, we got to get going. And something would stop me. You know, he would say something right at the end, right when we're starting to walk away, and we'd be like, what? You know, it's like, and then that would continue conversation and all of this stuff. Oh, I skipped one part. When we were playing the guitar, actually, when I took it back after he played, I tried playing the most delicate thing that I know, which was a flamenco guitar song. Can't remember the name of it, but I learned this song. I took 3 flamenco lessons, and I learned this song. I can't remember what it was, but it's a very easy. It's a finger plucking, you know, beautiful little riff. So I played that song, and when I finished it, he starts talking about the author of the song. He names the author, or the writer, the composer of the song. He's like, yes, that's, you know, he knows the name of the song, and he knows the composer, and he starts talking about the composer as though he knows the guy. And I'm thinking, this guy, I thought this was a classical song. And so I ask him, I'm like, isn't this a classical song? And he says, yes. And I'm like, so isn't that guy dead? Or, I mean, and his answer is like, basically in the affirmative, like, well, yes, he did die. You know, something like that. But he said, it's like he said something about how the guy comes to the church from time to time. He said that about multiple people. He comes to the church from time to time. And that's when I asked him if like the guy was dead, and he's like, yeah, he did die.
So Soraya, I don't know if you get this, but whenever like this happened to me when Kyle told this story, and then when I hear it later, I get from these parts of the story like this, I get this the Count of Saint Germain sort of feel.
Yeah, totally.
You know what I'm saying? Like the guy talks about someone who everyone around him knows has been is from hundreds of years ago, and yet the dude's talking about him in a way that gives you the implication that he knew him personally.
Right. Yeah, I could totally see that.
Yeah.
Yeah, he talked about another person who Ty knew of, and that person was also dead. And Ty mentioned that, and he said it again in the same manner, like agreeing that yes, the guy died, but that he comes to the church from time to time. It was just like, oh, and then we just accepted it. We were just like, okay, it was like,
right on, bro.
Yeah, cool. And
didn't he ask you guys to sign the guitar?
Oh yeah, that's right. After we were done playing the guitar, he asked us to sign it, and we're like, what?
Well,
like,
he wants you to sell your soul, and
oh, is that what happened?
yeah,
he's going to make sure that you will also come to the church from time to time. After
exactly.
You die.
To rock the impossible guitar. So I kind of changed it. He wanted us to sign the guitar. We didn't have a pen, so he was like, just engrave it with your knife or whatever. And we're like, really? Like,
you want us to engrave our names on this ancient relic?
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah. He's like, it'll be in the archives one day. That's what he told us about the guitar. So what we decided to do is Ty and I wrote our initials into the 7th fret on this guitar. And one of them, if you're holding the guitar and you're looking down, you see one of our initials upright. And if you're standing away from it and looking at someone holding the guitar, you see the other initials upright. So one's on the top of the fret and the other one's on the bottom of the fret, right in the 7th fret, which is cool. We were the only people who signed the 7th fret.
But it was, like you said, it was covered in signatures.
It's like, even then, I had it's like my mind was working like 7th fret.
Yeah.
There's some kind of weird, like,
numerological thing happening.
I get some harebrained idea like that. So that's what we did, and he was all about it. He was like, yes, please. Oh, man, I'm skipping around. Apologies. But on the way there, going back to when we were in the vehicle, this is important, and this is why it reminded me of signing the guitar. When Ty gives him my oldest book, the very first book that I ever started writing lyrics in. I have this book in front of me right now, and it's like it's a hardbound book that has just blank pages.
They're like journal books.
Unlined pages.
Unlined pages.
Ty hands the guy this book, and the guy's leafing through it or whatever, and then Ty's like, yeah, you should sign the book, man, sign it. Well, this book is like, it's full, and so he's like, he's kind of wondering where to sign it, and Ty's like, just sign the cover. Ty, my buddy, is telling this stranger to sign the cover of my very personal journal and lyric book.
Right.
A page that I can't rip out.
Right.
And I just I turn around and I'm to say no. And he's holding the pen over the cover of the book and looking right. It was like eye contact immediately right when I'm going around to be like, no. And we make eye contact and I'm like, yes, sign the cover. It's just instant mind change.
Yeah.
When I look at his eyes, it was so weird. So he signs this book, and I have it here in front of me in a cursive. And remember, we're driving in a Jeep, and it's we're bouncing around on the road, so it's a little sloppy. But he's got this cursive. It says Sanctus Larius, and then there's a line under that, and then there is something no one that has ever looked at this knows what script it is, but it's some kind of script, and it's intelligible. And then there's a line, and at the bottom he writes his normal name, Larry Sparks, in cursive.
Yeah. So in between the two English signatures there's something in there that looks like a written script, but we have not been able to find anybody who recognizes it. And we,
I asked him if it was Hebrew. I was like, is this like Hebrew or something? And he's like, no, but in his way, basically is just like, no. No, it's something else. Much deeper. mysterious. I don't know. So there it is. I have that. His signature on the inside of on the back cover.
Yeah, which we can always look at to prove to ourselves this event
actually did
take
happen.
place.
So yeah, jumping back forward, he signs my book. We signed his guitar, and so he also sold his soul to us. But in any case,
tell him about the dog.
Okay, dog story. Again, you have to imagine, like, in my mind, in the back of my mind, I'm feeling irresponsible this whole time. Like, I am supposed to be fixing my car so I can give my dad back his.
Right.
And I have this thing where I get impatient. Ty's just like totally relaxed, hanging out, chatting with the guy. I kind of wander off, like, I need to get going. And there's this dog. There's like a van parked, and there's like a dog under these trees. This big dog, like a German Shepherd or something. And I walk over to the dog, and it's just sitting there like a statue. And when I get close to it, it suddenly like stands and too quickly for my comfort comes towards me and reaches the extent of its chain and just like pulls on that chain tight where it's like choking itself, staring at me and otherwise not moving. And I stop dead in my tracks, and I'm just probably a few feet away from the dog. And I'm like, okay, this may be a bad idea. I turn around, and Ty's, like got his back to me or something. He's over there talking to Larry Sparks, who's sitting on the picnic table. And Larry Sparks is staring at me, or staring over to where I am. Maybe he's staring at the dog. I look over there, and I see that he's looking at me. And then when I turn back around, the dog is now like just sitting down, wagging his tail, like just all happy. And I'm like, wow,
what just happened?
So then I end up petting the dog and doing that and coming back. But it's, it's like that type of situation. I didn't really think anything of it until later.
Right, right.
In fact, all of those strange things that happened, it's like I let them breeze by without really too much questioning in my mind. It's kind of like the Jedi mind trick where you're just like, oh yeah, these aren't the droids I was looking for. So, anyway, and this other part that's to me a really key aspect to this story is the gift. So, one of the many times that I tried to leave, we were finally walking away after saying goodbye. And Larry Sparks says, would you like some uncut stones? And Ty and I both turn around at the same time and say,
he said,
what?
Untouched.
And we say,
right?
We say, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
He says, would you like some untouched stones?
Huh.
And we both turn around and say, what? And he says, would you like some uncut stones?
Okay.
I later verified this with Ty because we didn't discuss it at the moment, and we didn't question what he had.
You're like, I must have misheard him or something.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right?
And so later when we discussed this, we both heard those two separate questions. Exactly. And so we go back and, we're like, okay, yeah, sure. And so he digs around in his robes or whatever, he's like, I don't know. He pulls out this little leather pouch, a small leather pouch, and he undoes the drawstring, opens up the leather pouch, and dumps out onto the picnic table like 20 or 25 stones that are all these different colors, many of them beautiful. None of them are cut, like faced or anything by a jeweler or whatever, but they look like jewels. And there's a couple of pieces of gold that look like broken pieces of actual jewelry. There's like a kind of a large piece of a broken piece of jewelry that I don't know what it was, but it was gold. And maybe there's a piece of silver.
He pours treasure onto the table.
Yeah. And then he's like, take as many as you like. Take whatever you want. And we're just like, Ty and I are just like, whoa, dude, where did you get these? We start picking them up and looking at them and inspecting stuff. And he's like, well, I just picked them up on the side of the road as I'm, blah, 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 as I'm walking from church to church.
From cathedral to cathedral.
Yeah. Stashing things in the archives.
Making recordings for the archives.
Yeah.
Whatever it is.
And so we're just like, wow, this is really cool, And so we we're picking through them, and I talked to him a little bit about the gold. Like I picked up the gold and I was inspecting it, and I was like, dude, I think this actually is like real gold. This is like solid gold. And he's like, you can take it if you like. And I'm like, no, man, that's your gold, bro. Like, I'm not gonna take your gold. That's, you could sell that or something, Anyway, I kind of get my eye on this green stone. I was like, wow, this looks like Russ's birthstone. This green one. What is your birthstone?
I can't remember.
It's like some green stone. Anyway, the first one maybe it was the first one I picked up was this purple one. I thought, this looks like my birthstone, like amethyst. I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, this could be amethyst, but it has a portion of the crystal is clear. So it fades from that purple amethyst color to a clear color. I mean, a clear, transparent, like quartz. So I think, no, maybe that's not amethyst. And I put it down, and then I pick up the green one, and I'm thinking, wow, this could be Russ's birthstone. And Larry Sparks.
Peridot? Is that how you say that? Peridot. It's a green birthstone.
Yeah, I don't know. So anyway, I pick up the green one, and I'm inspecting that one, and Larry Sparks reaches over and he picks up the purple one, holds it up to me and says, I think this could be amethyst, or I think this is amethyst, or however he said it. And I argue with him, nah, I don't think it is. It's got this clear, transparent part. I don't think it's amethyst. And he goes, well, you can take it anyway, in any case. And I'm like, no, that's cool, man. I appreciate it, but whatever. I don't know what the deal is. It's like I'm having this weird thing. Anyway, Ty is picking through them as well. He's offering stones to Ty. So we end up leaving the place. I don't remember who took what, but I know that I for sure took this green one, but we ended up with 3 others. I also have these stones in front of me.
Well, let me just say this, because I'm just looking these things up here. According to the Google, the esoteric meaning of the stone amethyst says these crystals represent purification and connection to spiritual and divine beings.
Jeez, that's the only one he mentioned to me. Wow. Wow. So we leave with 4 stones, a red one, a yellow one, a blue one, and a green one. And I'm holding this green one in my hand. The other ones I think we put in the center console of the Jeep or whatever. So I guess I may jump back to other portions of being with Larry Sparks, but I guess for the most part, that was kind of it.
Yeah.
There was another moment where he stopped us when we were leaving to say a prayer.
Oh, that's right.
I think this may have been the last one. He was like, let's pray together. And I don't know if, any of your, I'm sure plenty of people have witnessed one of these situations where somebody suggests you pray and you're like, oh no.
Yeah.
And then like they go on and on
yeah.
and on forever. Right. So that's like, I'm thinking like, I don't want to do this, but we stand there all facing each other. And he says like these 3 real quick sentences and it's over. And I think that what they was like, keep us from sin. May our travels be safe and may our music be great or something like that. It was just so quick.
And you're like,
and me and Ty were just like, rock and roll, buddy. Yes. So
may our music be excellent.
Yeah. May our music be excellent or whatever. However he said it, they were just 3 very quick, short sentences. One about music, one about being, safe travel. And the other one about, don't do bad things.
Right.
So away we go, and we're driving out. And again, top is down on the Jeep, 2 long-haired, hippie-looking dudes in downtown San Antonio. And I've looked like a hippie for a long time, and I know, like, I just am used to, and being a young guy, the cops look at you like, oh, what are you up to?
Right.
You look like a hoodlum. It's like, I don't know how to describe it. They think I'm up to no good.
Sure.
It's just normal.
I know that feeling.
Yeah. Yeah. And I understand.
You are.
Exactly. I've been up to no good plenty, and those cops are right to be, suspicious.
Yeah, be scoping you out. That's right.
So it's like we passed this cop right after we left. Like it's the first vehicle we passed. The guy doesn't even look at us. Just zooms right by, just doesn't pay attention. And I thought that was strange. So it's another, I don't know, maybe, might be stepping a little too far there. But that was just the last, we were just, it's like there's no other cars on the road.
Yeah.
We got the top down. It's clear as day. He can look right at us, and he just doesn't even
glance. So at some point down the road, you guys are both like, what the hell?
We are driving in silence.
Yeah.
I'm contemplating this whole ordeal, I'm just contemplating the strangeness of this entire thing. Ty is obviously doing the same thing. And I eventually just ask him, like, what did you think of that guy? You know, and he sits in silence for a while. And then he's like, I don't know, dude. What did you think of that guy? And the first thing that came to mind to me was just like, I don't know. He did not seem human. And Ty was like, that's exactly what I was thinking. And right then I remembered, boom, you will pick him up on the side of the road. And I almost freaking had just a meltdown. I was just like, oh, no! And then Ty, I just remember this thing that I haven't told anybody. And Ty, I don't know, Ty must have just been like, what the hell just happened to you? Because I just started freaking out, hyperventilating, like, holy crap. And so I tried to explain this very excitedly to Ty, this whole scenario with me, doing all of that praying and meditating and being told I would pick this being up on the side of the road. And,
right.
And it just happened. And it was like right then, it was so obvious to me, everything that happened, all this stuff the guy says, he's reading my mind the whole time. He knew it was my birthstone. It was like all these things are rushing into my mind, everything that happened. He made the dog come.
Yeah.
It was just like,
you were invisible to all those people.
I was invisible to everybody there. The church bell rang after he played his song. We couldn't play his guitar. Ty, I'm like laying out the case the whole way home. Meanwhile, I'm holding this green stone in my hand that I think this is Russ's birthstone. I'm like, dang it. He knew it was my birthstone. So sure enough, we get home. Russ is over there playing, killing zombies on his computer. And me and Ty walk in, and Russ just looks at us and like, what happened to you guys?
I could instantly tell. They were both like wide-eyed and wild-haired, something had happened to them. And they were extremely excited.
We both start talking at the same time, telling them all this crazy shit. We do a number of things that night. Russ, pauses the video game and starts looking all this stuff up. We show him the writing. He's like, it could be Aramaic. He starts. So we all start digging. I go to my Bible. I'm like looking up verses about angels. And the first one I looked up is like, do not forget to entertain strangers. For some have entertained angels without even knowing it. And I'm like, bam, bro, proof. So I circle that one. And then we look up the song that I played, because at the time I knew the name of it.
That's right. I forgot about this.
Can't remember the name of this song, but somebody will, I can find out. Maybe I should, well, anyway, we look up
Why don't I just get that guitar and you can play it real quick? Somebody will recognize it. Maybe they'll write you and tell you what the name of it is. But we looked it up. It's anonymous. Play it on a 12-string?
Huh.
Ooh.
No. Okay. It's anonymous. It's like no one knows who wrote this song. The writer is lost.
Interesting.
And it's very old.
Right.
And for the life of me, I could not remember the name of the guy, because he said his name so many times. And I was just like, dang it, I can't remember what his name is.
Yeah, the name that Larry Sparks gave for the composer of this song. Kyle's never been able to remember what it was.
I could never remember it. But he claimed to know the guy and still, in some strange way, knows him. So it was like stuff like that. We were just digging, and I'm skipping stuff again, because one of the other first things that happened is, as we're getting closer to the house driving, my hand is sticky.
That's never something you want.
No, you don't want your hand being sticky.
Especially when you don't know how it got that way.
I'm holding this green stone. So I go up into the sink in the house, in the apartment, and I turn on the warm water, and I'm holding this stone under the warm water, and it just melts. It just disintegrates. It's like a piece of candy or something. It's gone.
And that reminds me of so many Faye stories, right?
Yeah.
So it's like,
they give you the treasure and you do something not quite right, and the treasure just either turns into rubbish or just evaporates before your eyes.
It just melted away.
Yeah.
And so we looked up amethyst in the Encyclopedia Britannica. Which version did we have? We had an encyclopedia in our apartment.
Yeah, an old school.
I looked up amethyst, and the picture in this encyclopedia looked exactly like the stone that he had.
Yeah,
I mean,
starts out quartz.
it
and
had the
turns
quartz
purple.
part. Of course, I didn't know much about the stone at all, and so I'm like, dang it, it was amethyst, and he knew it, and he knew it was my birthstone. Anyway, the other 3 stones still remain: a blue one, a red one, and a yellow one, and I have them also in a leather pouch now.
Yeah, he's kept them for 20 years in this leather pouch.
For 21 years, I have kept these stones. I even had a jeweler have them, because the jeweler was a neighbor, and they got a laser machine that would tell you the composition of something. And the strangest thing happened with that. I never got the data from him. I gave him these stones, and that whole ordeal was very strange. He gives them back to me in the leather pouch, and he's like, I don't know what they are, bro. They're nothing. They're nothing. And I'm like, what do you mean they're nothing? He's like, they're nothing. And I could never tell if he meant they were nothing because they weren't
valuable
jewels. They weren't like precious stones, but that's not what he told me. And
yeah, the implication, and then, trying to get the data, you're like,
yeah,
does that mean your machine
the competition?
Yeah,
the composition. The composition.
Yeah.
I don't know. So I still don't know. I could take him to somebody else. But I did test the hardness of one of them, and they're extremely hard. Because the green one melted away, I was like, well, what the heck are these other ones? So I got down on one of them with a file and couldn't even. It's like they're really hard stones.
Huh.
But anyway, strange. 3 stones.
Yeah, so we have the signature and the stones and the story.
And have you looked up his name?
I've done that, and I did a lot of that back then. Obviously, I even called the mission down there at the cathedral and asked about him. Nobody knew, and then they gave me another number to call, and I called those people, and none of those people knew of him, and they gave me another number of people to call, and so I did this whole thing, and then finally the last number I called, nobody knew him, and they gave me the first number. So it's this giant circle of nobody knows who this guy is, and they've never heard of him, and he's not staying there, and it's whatever. But that's where we left him, was sitting on that picnic table as we walked away, and he just sitting there, just staring at the sky while we're walking off. And
preparing to translocate back where he came from.
Although it's not the same person, Larry Sparks is an American bluegrass singer and guitarist.
Yeah. Yep.
So, that puts me in mind of, the Men in Black stuff where they use someone's name, but they're not quite right. So you met a guy who was a guitar player with the same name as a famous bluegrass guitar player?
Yeah. Yeah, I've thought of that, too. There are Men in Black elements to this, except
See, and that's the other thing. He told us that he spent time with the Texas Tornadoes and Freddie Fender, and he knew Freddie Fender really well. Turns out he's dead.
Yeah, so explain a little bit for people what those are, just in case they don't know.
What do you mean? It's a band.
Texas Tornadoes is a band.
It's like I've never listened to them. They're like they were really popular Americana. I don't know what it's called.
Okay.
It's got Latin influences and stuff. But yeah, they were they were a well-known band.
Their signatures on his guitar?
Their signatures were on his guitar.
There you go.
Freddie Fender's signature was very well, because to me, it's like, I know Fender guitars. So I was like, Freddie Fender? I was thinking it was Fender guitars. Well, Ty's like, no, it's Texas Tornadoes. And it turns out, and Doug Sam. Is it Doug Sam? Well, it was one of those guys. Freddie Fender was there, and Doug Sam was also on there, but one of them was dead at the time. I don't know.
Texas Tornadoes is a Tejano supergroup composed of some of country music's biggest artists who modernized the Tex-Mex style.
There you go.
I've never heard of them.
Yeah, I think it was more of a regional. I don't know. I don't know much about them at all. But that the person that he was talking about as though they were alive when they were actually dead.
Right.
And that was either Doug Sam. Doug Sam was one of the members, or it was Freddie Fender. One of those guys that he was talking about. That's when Ty asked him, like, isn't that guy dead? And he gives the same sort of cryptic answer about it.
Yeah.
Well, I can tell you from my perspective that I would recognize this much later when I started reading people having UFO reports, encounters, paranormal encounters, that the behavior was similar. I saw them come into the apartment like people who had just seen a UFO craft or had an encounter with an otherworldly being.
I felt like that for sure.
And then it lasted, it slowly fades, but it lasts for days, that they're in this mindset of like, we just had an encounter with something otherworldly. And, over time it does fade, but like we're still here talking about it today. It still puzzles us to this day. Obviously I wasn't there for any of it, but I was on the edges because I was there. I was the first person they spoke to after having the encounter.
And Ty and I had two totally different reactions to it. I became like I became the guy. I was like telling everybody that was a friend of mine, right? I was telling all these people this story. Ty was silent. Ty would be there while I was telling the story. He'd just be quiet the whole time.
Yeah.
And
which is completely the opposite of what usually happens.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I think he went a totally different direction. He's just like, I don't know, man. I don't know. And to me, I was like totally believer 100%. I'm like, the guy was an angel, bro. You know what I mean?
But is Ty the type of person who just doesn't like to think about this stuff?
No, I don't think so.
Well, okay. Some of this kind of stuff freaks him out a little bit.
Yeah.
But he loves our show. Our podcast. He's interested, but yeah, I think the personal encounter freaked him out a little bit. So, and this is again, like I've seen this in reports, right? There's the guy, when you got a group of people who have an encounter, it's sometimes, not always, but sometimes it's the really gregarious, outgoing person who has a strange, interesting, introspective response.
Yeah.
To this kind of stuff, whereas the person who is more quiet about it is like, holy shit, we just saw aliens. It's like, but yeah, Ty went, he went thoughtful about it, which is, I don't know. It's just a really interesting thing. Like it was an interesting reaction for him to have.
This is also happening. All this takes place right at a very key period in both our lives. Yeah. All three of our lives, me, Russ, and Ty.
We were approaching a major cusp, a huge turning point.
So the story continues.
How much time do we have, Soraya?
Yeah.
Just keep going.
Okay.
So, how to continue? Let's see. Basically, moving on. I am this I can say elevated my spirituality greatly, because this is like, from the beginning of the story of like doing this praying and meditation and then having that voice.
Yeah, from your perspective, you had what amounted to like a full-on Old Testament style encounter.
Exactly. Yeah. So I'm just like, boom, I am in, and I'm like feeling very much more in touch with like the supernatural in my mind, in my soul, and yet, I'm not going to church. I'm not like doing any of that. I'm just a spiritual person. And I'm also 20 years old and I like to party. So, I had done hallucinogenics a handful of times. I go to a party and I do, somebody gives me, MDMA. Mm-hmm. And we're partying all night and like the party's thinning out and it's like the end of the night. And I have these two experiences of I have these two visions clearly in my mind, and they're mundane and comical because the first one was about a beer. We're out of beer. And when I realized that we are out of beer and the remainder is a small group of us, like 5 of us left at the party and we're all still kind of tripping. I'm like, oh no, we're out of beer. They're like, yeah, we're out. I have this vision so clear in my mind of the location of this beer that's like out in the field, outside, underneath this truck, laying in the grass. And I'm like tripping. So I'm like, I'm going to get it. So I go hiking out into this field because it was a huge party. It was a college town, and it was gigantic. And the field was like full of cars when the party. They had DJs. It was just an enormous party. But now it's like the stragglers, and there's like just a few cars left, and people took rides home or whatever. So there's cars scattered out in the field that were parked way out there. So I walk all the way out to this truck. There it is, the truck that I saw. And I get up next to the truck and I kneel down and I look under it and there's the beer, exactly where I saw it was, right? And I'm like, holy crap. I just saw...
I'm psychic!
So I come back in and proclaim myself a genius. And time goes by. Like, we run out of smokes. That's the second thing, right? We're out of smokes. Cigarettes. And the same exact thing happens. Like, I have this vision of this crumpled pack of Marlboro Light 100s that's down in the track of the sliding glass door to the back porch. And in my mind, I see this flattened smoke in it, a single flattened smoke inside this pack. So I was like, I'm going to go get it. So I go over to that door and look down, and there's this crushed pack, and I pick it up and I open it, and there's a flat smoke in there. So I'm just like, bam. So it's like this, but the second time this happens, like, my mind starts going like, how am I doing this? And so I break it all down into this like sort of mechanical process of following your first impulse. Like, there was something about the moment that it was like such a minute moment that this flash of this vision happened. And it was like the first thing my brain did in response to, something new, some idea. And I was like, okay, so somehow my higher self already knows all the information. And it's like, there's a glimpse of like, that's what the first impulse is. That's what your impulse is.
Right.
But it's got to be original. It's got to be the first original thought, because immediately upon getting that impulse, the mind's tendency is to start picking it apart and applying logic and sticking all this stuff to it and making context for the world around you.
Absolutely.
When none of that stuff all that stuff actually just gets in the way of the true information. This is the way I was breaking it down. And so I came home from this party and I turned this into like a practice. Like, I am going to practice trying to focus on that minute moment of intuition or of impulse, thought, ideas, and follow them, and not apply all the logic and all the stuff and try to fix them and make them right and then do it, but actually just do it. And so that starts me down this path where I get home, and of course this place is 4 or 5 hours away. So the next day after sleeping, I get up and I go home, and I get home much later than I thought I was going to, and I have to work early in the morning. And I'm really bad with, once I go to sleep, it's like I am a hard sleeper. You can't wake me up. My alarms won't wake me up. Like, I had it one time, and of course, because I partied hard, like, if there's drinking involved, it's even worse.
Right.
And one time my alarm was going off for like 8 hours. Back when alarms would just never stop. It was like a thing you plugged into the wall that had big red numbers on it. And a giant button. It went off for literally 8 hours because I was trying to get like 1 hour of sleep before work.
Yeah.
After staying up partying all night like an idiot. So yeah, I slept through 8 hours of an alarm. So this is a thing that I know is possible. I get home way too late. And I know I'm only going to get 4 hours of sleep before I have to get up to go to work. And I go in, I'm going to lay down, and the impulse is there. And as I'm reaching for my alarm clock, it's like, do not set an alarm, and just lay down and remember the position that you're laying in. This is the first impulse. So I'm like, okay, that's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to set an alarm. So I'm like risking my job basically for this first impulse. And as I'm laying down, I have another one, and it's like, ask for a dream. So I ask the Almighty for a dream. And dreams, side note, are like, they were a big deal to me, and still are. But
as they should be.
Yeah, I used to dream a lot. I had very vivid, awesome dreams, and I loved them. And they had just stopped at some point earlier in my life, in my teenage years, and then they were just very seldom and not very great when I did have them.
Oh, you always had them. You just didn't remember them.
Yeah, exactly. So I missed my dreams. So it's like, ask for a dream. And so I ask, like a prayer, I ask for a dream and fall asleep. And I wake up exactly like 4 hours on the dot. I wake up later, remembering my position. I'm in the exact same position that I went to sleep in, which had never happened to me before either. But it was like coming to from being asleep. It was like, I don't know, everything. It was just like I was just aware. And I had this massive dream that was pertinent to all of these things and goals in my life at the time. And it was incredibly vivid. And it like woke me up to a lot of things that I was in denial about. And just, I mean, it was just an incredibly powerful dream to me at the time. And there were aspects of that dream that later physically came true. Like there was a part of the dream where the dream actually begins where we're in a vehicle. I'm in the back seat of a vehicle and we're on our way to Dallas, Texas, which is about 5 hours drive from where we are. And there was patches of snow on the ground. And a major part of this scene in the dream was this developing situation with this gigantic cloud in the sky that actually was Santa Claus, but he was like evil, very evil demon Santa Claus that was like tricking everybody. And it was this crazy, terrifying, like nightmarish being. And of course, I don't really know what that means, but I have some guesses. But anyway, I don't need to interpret dreams right now. Later, the band ends up going to Dallas to record in a studio up there, which I didn't book that studio. I don't remember who did. But we go up there and then it took too long. And so we had to go home, and then we had to book another session that just me and Russ went to by ourselves. And when we were driving up to do that one, there was like a crazy blizzard that came through. And so when Russ and I are driving there's patches of snow on the ground. And I'm just like, holy crap. I remember this dream. And then we miss our exit right before we get to the studio, and it's at night and we have to go around or whatever. And we see this gigantic blown up Santa Claus thing. And I'm like, like, I don't know. It was just, there were aspects like that just, I don't know, it was just crazy.
Well,
anyway, go ahead.
Oh, finish what you're saying.
Well, just to kind of wrap that up, like I had a series of dreams. There were, basically 3 dreams in somewhat of a like that had the same level of intensity and effect, and all 3 I asked for, and the asking of them was that same impulse upon like laying down to go to sleep. There was just this, and it was like when the impulse came, I knew it was true. Like it was the right, it was an impulse, because the other times it would sort of trick you, like, oh, is that? But then in the real times, it's like I would ask, and then boom. So I had these 3 dreams.
Well, let's stop here and have you continue this on a Patreon segment, because we're way over time.
All right, no problem.
And tell people where they can find you.
Brothersoftheserpent.com is our website. You can find all the podcast related stuff there, but any podcast app or service you use, you can just find us, Brothers of the Serpent.
All right. And we're going to continue this conversation in the Patreon.
That's right.
All right.
More craziness to come.
I want to take a moment here to give a shout out to all of my Patreons. It's because of you that this show is possible. And a special shout out to those of you pledging $10 or more. Tim, Allison Cook, Super Inframan, Stephen St. George, Andrew Nichols, Matthew Sproul, Christine, the 100th Monkey Project, a blue second-generation MR2 drifting around a Japanese mountain, Patricia Giaquinta, Alex Whitcomb, American Rambler, Andrew Maines, Barbara Fisher, Beverly Williamson, Big Boy Limina, Charles Davis, Charles in Florida, land of the crazy and communicable, Chris Ernst, Chris Johnson, Craig Cicernos, Craig Parmenter, Crystal Ann Compton, David Moore, Denise Sarek, Diane B., Diona Bidwell, Duffy Dowder, Edu Camahort, MTK, Eric Citron, Eric Todd, J. Otto Bullitt, James Lattimore, Johanna Rojas, John W. Bracken, Carla Mahoney, Kevin Schreck, Kristen L., Laser Printer Jam, Linz Jackson K., Luke Osborne, Mark Bowley, Mark Brady, Matt in Delaware, Patricia W., Paul Jeffries, Ray Benedetto, Riker at Stark, Roger Gonzalez, Sam Sharon, Stone Wilderness Tactical Therapist, Taylor Bell, 36 Dingo, Thunderboy, Tyler Glimstead, Vincent Treewell, Walker, Will Gebhard, Will Powell, Ren Collier, Martina Saint, and Stephen D. Thank you all so very, very much. There's a lengthy Patreon segment to go along with this. If you're a Patreon, you'll be getting that soon. And if you want to become a patron, it's only $3 a month, and it helps us out greatly. And you can do that at wheredidtheroadgo.com. Just click on the Patreon link. Next week will be the UFO History Show. Traditionally our first show of the new year. Aaron Gullius, Mike Cleland. Always a good time with that. And I want to thank everybody who has supported me in the first 9 years of Where Did the Road Go? Yeah, it's a long time. One more year and I'll have a decade. All right. We're going to leave you with a song from, what's the name of your band?
Well, this band is an older band, and the name of the band is Rune.
Oh. Okay.
R-U-N-E. And this was the band I was in at the time of that all these events took place in the story. And so this song is called Theta, and it's an unreleased, unpublished song from an unpublished entire album that we did, which is the last thing that we did as a band. And basically, this song is about, I wrote it inspired by that first of the 3 dreams. Okay. And so this is like being written by that 20-year-old guy who was having these things happen and still in the mind frame of interpreting them and looking at them in the traditional sense back then. So, all right. Yeah.
Well,
here you go.
Let's hear it.
Where I laid my head.
You have been listening to Where Did the Road Go? This show is made possible in part from our Patreons, and we thank you and everyone listening for helping us continue this exploration of the strange. You can always find everything Where Did the Road Go related at www.wheredidtheroadgo.com. And thank you so much for your support.